So as you think about that and you think about what's happening, the Chinese government, being still somewhat of a centrally planned economy, is saying we have to go to electric cars because we don't have a choice. Even if we could buy oil up to $300, $400 a barrel, we can't buy nearly enough of it to be able to service 500 million cars. So in seeing that problem 20 years ahead, they now have in most regions an $18,000 tax credit for the purchase of an electric car. Compare that to a $7,500 federal tax credit here in the U.S. and compare the size of their economy to the size of ours. We're still a $15 trillion economy, and you start to see the magnitude of the problem of why electric cars are inevitable. And so I think that gives you a sense of why we determined we had to be in China. We understood the risks of doing business in China, which is why we picked a company that was not state-owned. It's a privately held company. It's controlled by one shareholder. And we negotiated a deal that we think protects our intellectual property. And we understand that people perceive there's risks there. But we're very comfortable with the deal we've done with Wangsheng and with the growth prospects that we're going to see there.
Very good. A question from the audience. What is EnerOne's approach to different batteries for hybrid electric vehicles versus electric vehicles?
So I think, without getting too technical, although after 5.5 years I'm getting to be pretty technical. The answer to this question is one size does not fit all. If you think about a battery just like you think about any other storage device, whether it be older technologies like lead acid or nickel metal hydride or the different chemistries with lithium ion. And as you look at the power to energy spectrum, high energy density applications like electric vehicles, like large-scale grid energy storage, high power density applications like hybrid electric cars, like frequency regulation, and then this sort of zone in between, which we'll call sort of plug-in hybrid land, which is sort of you need a little bit of power and you need a little bit of energy, and that's a pretty interesting sort of mid-zone. What's clear to me, and this is just a game of logic, not a game of chemistry, what's clear to me is that one size does not fit all. EnerOne figured this out about 5-6 years ago, and I think one of the things we did was we said, can we have a different suite of chemistries for the different challenges that we're going to see across the spectrum of power to energy? And the answer was, on the high energy side, we believed, as did some of our other friends in Japan, like Nissan and like LG Chem in Korea, that the manganese-based chemistry suite was going to be the most appropriate on the cathode side for high energy density. Today we've achieved world-leading energy density at 168 watt-hours per kilogram at the cell level. Okay, so that's there. Where do I see high energy density chemistries going? Clearly we're going toward 300-400 over time. Again, I'm asked, what does that look like? Is that lithium air? Is that vanadium oxysulfide? There are so many different chemistries that we still have not yet discovered. And one of the things I love about lithium is that it's so malleable, it's so flexible. There's so many different things that can be done. So I'm not going to talk about that because there's many more PhDs in the room that'll do a better job than I will. But that's the spectrum of chemistries on the energy density side. On the high power side, EnerOne was one of the first to develop, in conjunction with our partnership with Argonne National Labs in Chicago, lithium titanate, which is an anode material. And as you think about anode versus cathode, the anode material has historically been graphite. And as you think about safety and you think about the challenges associated with, let's say, a thermal event, graphite is one of those materials that you want to get out of the car. And so we were one of the first to start looking at and changing the anode-based materials with lithium titanate. We think lithium titanate is the safest, best high-power material in the world today. And certainly we are now joined by other folks like Toshiba, for example, who've exclusively gone to LTO. Alter Nano here in Indiana also uses LTO. So that gives you some idea of the spectrum. And it is not without its challenges, but there is a tremendous amount of research and development work that still needs to be done.
A quick follow-up to that. Do you believe you have reached the optimum approach in your manufacturing of your batteries? Optimum approach, I'm going to give you a similar answer to chemistry, cut and paste, different technology response, which is that
Based on what we know today, yes, right? Based on what we don't know today, which is plenty, no. And so what does that mean? That means that ultimately, as you think about lithium-ion batteries today, they are liquid-based, which means you have a liquid electrolyte that is the active material in the cells. Think about the best way to describe a battery without getting way too technical, and Bill will allow me to use poetic license here, but if you think about the cathode as the pitcher and the anode as the catcher in a baseball game, okay, the ion is the baseball. And if you think about the way the energy is released, the cathode throws the ball to the anode, okay? That's how energy is released in a lithium-ion battery. They're now put a polymer plastic white screen between the pitcher and catcher. That's the separator, okay? That's as simple as I can get. If you think about that and you think about how complicated it is to produce that product in volume, what we know today is that there is a large coating machine that coats the anode and cathode. You then have a sandwich stacker that stacks the anode and cathode to about 13 of each into a cell. You then take that and you put that into a module. We have probably one of the most advanced module manufacturing, automated manufacturing lines in the world today at our Mount Comfort plant in Greenfield. And then we do our own packaging with systems, the electronics. Okay, where I see the field going and why did I go through that? About 90% of the capital investment that goes into manufacturing the battery goes into the cell. So why did our friends at Delphi and Rodney O'Neill sell us the cell business? Because Rodney at Delphi believes that no sane person would ever get into the cell business. Maybe he's right. So in 2004, that's how Interdel was formed. The cell business is incredibly capital intensive. The future of the cell business is most likely going to be in what we call solid state chemistry. That means you take out the liquids, less things to go wrong, less moving parts. You go to a more solid state chemistry process where you end up with, let's just say without, again, getting too technical, you end up with the ability of the active material to defoliate, to separate from the substrate, is much harder to do with solid state chemistry. When? That's the question. And that's why I think Cameron mentioned earlier, that's why you have to be very careful about the amount of monuments you put into the ground today, because the technology does evolve, and you have to be careful about how much you invest into solid state, into liquid state if solid state is coming. And that's one of the main reasons why we have a nanomaterials division to research that topic.
You mentioned cost and infrastructure in your comments. Here's a question on cost. How fast will the cost of batteries decline to $300 per kilowatt hour, $150, et cetera, et cetera?
I can tell you that I will never sell a lithium-ion battery for $200 a kilowatt hour or less. So if that's where the pricing's going, then we're going to go do something else. I think I come back to my economic model, which I would proffer is the right economic model, which is secondary use. Clearly we're among the leaders in costs today at between the $600 to $700 a kilowatt hour. We're there. I think some other folks are in that zone. Getting down to $500 a kilowatt hour is very achievable. With LG and Samsung Bosch selling product at $200 to $300 today, they're clearly losing money. If they choose to do that to buy market share, they did that in 18650s in the laptop market. That's obviously their choice in terms of competition, is how much money do you want to lose. Nothing burns money faster in lithium-ion batteries than idle plant. That's the same in any manufacturing business. So, there's a balance there. But at the end of the day, I think one of the things we are focused on is how do we continue to protect margin, and how do we continue to deliver the best and highest quality product to our customers, all the while keeping in mind that it has to be cost competitive. And, on the B2B side, whether it be heavy duty, medium duty, on grid, I think we totally get where we need to be from a pricing perspective. I think it always comes back to any time you touch the consumer, that's going to be where the price sensitivity comes in. And I think we're going to focus on getting the secondary use market right.
Okay, on that theme, a question: is there a resale market now for lithium lithium-ion batteries for second use? For example, Toyota, will Toyota or someone buy back used Prius batteries? If not, why not?
So let's separate. The Toyota's product today, the Prius, is a nickel metal hydride product. There's not going to be as much secondary on the nickel. On lithium, so the plug-in Prius, which is available in limited quantities today, that's still a 1 kilowatt hour battery. That's still a fairly small battery. So the difference in size and weight between a hybrid and even a full hybrid and an electric car, I mean, the battery that powers the Think today is 24 kilowatt hours. So it's 600 pounds versus the 60, 70 pounds of battery that go into the Prius at 1 kilowatt hour. So you're not going to see as much reuse capability on the hybrids. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I think electric cars can enter the market and be adopted quicker, is precisely because of the economic equation of the battery being disaggregated in terms of a cost component for the car. So you're not going to see as much reuse on the Prius. On the automotive side, again, we have an economic model that we are working with several companies on. It's proprietary today. We think we're the early leader in this industry in secondary use, and so you'll hear more about it shortly. But that is going to be a critical component. Is okay, what do you do with the battery? When do you take it out? And do you have anything proprietary in terms of your state of charge curve versus the other? One example I always like to use is that this is a great model because it will allow for different batteries to be rated differently in terms of their chemistry, the quality, etc. And I don't like to use Moody's and S&P for their negative connotations, but from the positive side, there will have to be a rating agency that comes and rates the batteries and looks at secondary use, and that will be, I think, very important in terms of understanding the total cost of ownership on the battery side. So there's going to be a lot of depth and complexity.
Another question from the audience. What is the message for a state such as Indiana when the energy for electric vehicles would be coal intensive? I hear, why buy a green car if I just use more coal-fired generation?
That's sort of a mutually assured destruction argument, isn't it? Why bother? We're all going to die anyway. So, John, to quote John Maynard Keynes, "In the long run, we're all dead." Yeah. So 96% coal-fired. My understanding is that a lot of those plants are between 30 and 40 years old and are starting to roll off. It's a great time to be building more fuel-efficient plants. It's a great time to be thinking about wind. It's a great time to be thinking about solar. All of this needs to be done. There is no silver bullet that you can fire. It is not going to happen overnight. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars when you think about the aggregate upgrades to the grid that are necessary. So, coming back to my baseball analogy, if we're still in the first inning, got to start somewhere. Clearly having a double emission of coal and then tailpipe, having zero emission, at least on one side of the equation, has to be better than having none. Obviously, one of the markets where we are very active is France, for the obvious reason that they have 44 nuclear plants, and we are zero emission from well to wheel. That has got to be a goal for the United States. I'm not going to sort of make a political stance on that because I'm also a businessman that understands that coal is the cheapest way to generate power, and we're going to be dealing with coal for a lot longer than I'm probably in this industry. So there has to be a balance, but it can't be ignore and let's do nothing and it's someone else's problem. So I guess that's a way I would start to answer the question is we got to start somewhere.